Hey, thank you for hopping on again, FD. As I was reading through all of this content, as I told you before, I learned a lot about US history, and I'm Canadian, so I don't know, the most about US history, unfortunately.
Or fortunately, you're lucky.
Yeah.
This year, compared to the 2020 election, President-elect Trump made gains across almost every single demographic group.
The former president's outreach to male voters seemingly paying off.
Do me a favor, do you know Elon Musk? Yes. He endorsed me.
Elon Musk purchased Twitter, changed it into X.
I'm Doc, Gothic MAGA.
There's no doubt that he exercised some power there.
You should do the same thing, Joe.
We went to interview Donald Trump.
We need Trump back.
In 2020 and 2016, about 4 in 10 men under 30 supported him. Yesterday, nearly half cast a ballot for Trump. Among men who turned out for the first time, 62% supporting Trump, while 36% supported Harris.
We need Trump back, and we need him back bad.
The Trump campaign has taken an unconventional approach, including appearances with unconventional media figures.
I want to thank some people real quick. I want to thank the Nelk Boys, Aiden Ross, Theo Vaughn, Bustin' with the Boys, and last but not least, the mighty and powerful Joe Rogan.
But one of the most notable shifts was among young men, who moved roughly 15 points to the right.
Welcome to my buckle. I mean, the day was like any other day, really. You say hi to the cat, go on your jog. The Canadian rumors say that if you look closely into the snow, you can actively see Mariah Carey defrosting. You know, everything was actually going pretty well until I... Why are you on my screen? Donald Trump, Getty Images 18697. Important announcement to make. This is going to be the most important announcement. This is going to be important. You know, I'm not really the biggest fan, and you're kind of uninvited. I'm president. I'll enter whatever room I want to. This is good. This is very good. Bro, we are in Canada. Did you not see the snow outside? Remember how I said I was going to do a 10% tariff? Oh no, that's actually a thing. That's like a thing that's like happening. Yeah, it's 25% now. Yeah, everybody likes it. Everybody claps. As everyone is aware, thousands of people are pouring through Mexico and Canada, bringing crime and drugs at levels never seen before. On January 20th, as one of my many first executive orders, I will sign all necessary documents to charge Mexico and Canada a 25% tariff on all products coming to the United States. And it's ridiculous. Open borders.
I don't know shit about Canadian history, so like,
and you don't learn about Black history at all. Like there's no Black history. Oh my God, Judas won. Bethlehem is cooked. Electoral politics. Citizens around the world hopefully do it. US's, specifically in my time of living, has seemed to dissolve this supposedly sacred practice into a band for band back and forth between which billionaire could endorse which party more for which benefits more. Elon Musk, CEO of Tesla and SpaceX, has accounted for more than a third of the donations to former President Donald Trump and other Republican candidates. Elon Musk was live on Twitter hosting challenges for Republican voters, boosting specifically Republican accounts, and platforming prominent leaders of the right like Ron DeSantis, who went on to win in Florida.
Everyone knows my husband Ron DeSantis is endorsed by President Trump, but he's also an amazing dad. Ron loves playing with the kids.
Build the wall.
He reads stories.
Then Mr. Trump said, "You're fired." I love that part.
He's teaching Madison to talk.
Make America great again.
People say Ron's all Trump, but he is so much more.
Big league. So good.
DeSantis? Come on, man. DeSantis doesn't have a shot. 45,
He's a white
45.
nationalist.
Oh, stop that.
He's a nationalist. He's a white supremacist.
And Donald Trump by reintroducing him to Twitter like Team Rocket in a Pokemon filler arc.
Make it double.
I just can't get away from him. But if we were to only look at billionaire endorsements as the main influence of this election, at least 83 billionaires, 2 of them Sentai billionaires, with a network of more than 100 billion each, are supporting Harris. Active election interference from billionaires is a big part of Republican and Democrat wealth alike. I'm not kidding. Elon Musk literally said he'd be arrested after this election if Kamala Harris won.
If he loses, man, what?
I'm fucked. If he loses, I'm fucked.
It does seem that way. You can't just be like,
Yeah, I'm like, how long do you think my prison sentence is going to be? Do you think, will I see my children? I don't know.
And then y'all still let Donald Trump win. Like, I feel like good dies every day. I'm not for carceral punishment, but for a billionaire, I'll pull out a little whatchamacallit, what do the French call it? Les guillotines! Get les guillotines! Les string, les guillotines, les gas station. Those are the 3 French words I'm the best at. Well, I'm sure Kamala gaining billions of dollars was no harm to her, leading for Joe Biden being able to duck a brunt of the criticism for this botched election.
With the COVID, with dealing with everything we have to do with...
From his poor showing.
Look, if we finally beat Medicare.
And Trump ultimately getting a presidency where he's able to instate whatever senator he wants. Like a real life Sims game. These are weird shenanigans. Like it's Electoral dressed to impress. It seems the only people that lost were US citizens. Critical sectors of America's institutional foundation are being threatened, specifically with these ridiculous Trump elects. Take the educational secretary, for example. They're basically in charge of establishing policies on federal financial aid for education and distribution, as well as monitoring these funds, collecting data on US schools and disseminating research, focusing national attention on key educational issues, prohibiting discrimination and ensuring equal access to education. These last 2 points highlight them because Trump has a weird way of implementing these strategies, you could say. Trump's project, firstly, focuses on canceling out the idea of student loan forgiveness, in line with a lot of initiatives seen in Project 2025. Electing people like Linda McMahon, she has a fair share of controversy, other than being the former CEO of WWE, and giving us 3 separate Rey Mysterio storyline unmaskings. I remembered that we already had 2, so why did that 3rd happen? I was very confused as a kid. I was like, I already seen this dude face. I searched it up on the internet. I seen his face too. Her husband also makes the WWE stars commit sexual assault. It's documented. However, Linda McMahon is currently the chair of the board known as America First Policy Institute, where one of their initiatives includes redefining history.
And people love him. Brooke Rollins, who put this on with Linda McMahon. Linda has been a great friend of mine for a long time, right, Linda? I want to thank you very much. And the America First Policy Institute, what a job they've done.
And I'm not kidding about this Project 2025 stuff. This Project 2025 stuff is actually in full effect, and it's a little scary. Even though Trump has stated...
Number one, I have nothing to do, as you know, and as she knows better than anyone, I have nothing to do with Project 2025.
He elected John Radcliffe to lead the CIA. U.S. Representative Melina Stansbury has stated,
first and foremost, this gentleman literally was the architect of Project 2025. And not only did he write the chapter for the OMB for Project 2025, it is our understanding that he was the brains behind the operation and helped to bring together the vast Trump loyalists and conservative community to put that document together. Now, when I read that document, Project 2025, it reads as a transition document. And as a former OMB employee, that is clearly what it is. And so Donald Trump spent months trying to distance himself from Project 2025 on the campaign trail. But with this nomination, it's very clear that not only was he not aware of it and had never read it and didn't know what it was, literally the architect of it is coming in one of the most powerful positions in the White House to remake the federal government.
This is a great group, and they're going to lay the groundwork and detail plans for exactly what our movement will do and what your movement will do when the American people give us a colossal mandate to save America, and that's coming.
So how will this affect you may ask? Well, if you're a woman in government, Elon Musk may be targeting you like a white kid on the way to a rural school. He's South African, it kind of lines up. Musk reposted 2 X posts that revealed the names and titles of people holding 4 relatively obscure climate-related government positions. Each post has been viewed tens of millions of times, and the individuals named have been subjected to a barrage of negative attention. And for all the people rightfully stressed about this situation, let me reach into my drawer for you.
Sweetheart, you're black. You are not a personality hire. They made sure you could do that job top to bottom, back to front before they handed you that badge. Please get it together.
Oh, but that's enough sentimentalism. Back to editing! Queer people are panicking too, justifiably. The last time Trump was in office, his educational secretary, DeVos, spent a lot of time reversing Obama-era guidance protecting transgender queer students, which is in line with Trump's presidential promise.
On day one, I will revoke Joe Biden's cruel policies on so-called gender-affirming care. Ridiculous. A process that includes giving kids puberty blockers, mutating their physical appearance, and ultimately performing surgery on minor children.
He tends to further implement the same strategies of gender essentialism that Betsy DeVos has put into process. In May 2016, the Obama Justice and Education Department sent a letter to school districts advising them that students should be allowed to use facilities, including bathrooms, that are consistent with their gender identity. But in February 2017, DeVos helped rescind that guidance. Trump's, at the time, educational secretary. But Trump isn't just attacking the LGBTQ, also policies which consider dynamics of race in America. In late 2018, DeVos made a similar move, dropping guidance that was meant to protect students of color from what the Obama administration called discriminatory discipline. Basically, since black students tend to experience disciplinary measures at higher rates than their peers in public schools in the United States, dropping this guidance essentially means there's less protection against bias in classrooms. Basically, under the guise of culture wars, Trump has managed to target marginalized people, yes, while covering up the fact that a lot of his policy statements are on an attack of a majority of Americans. The project calls student loan forgiveness essentially a political ploy. It wants to privatize student loans, and in the meantime, suggests getting rid of forgiveness programs.
Yeah, I think if we have another Trump presidency, we could expect loan relief to grind to a halt, and an ethos of punishment for student loan borrowers, even if they did everything right.
You chose this. Why? I'm confused. I'm not here to say that your life is perfectly fine under the Biden administration, because there is definitely war in Ba Sing Se. I don't want to make y'all feel like the world isn't crumbling and burning. A lot of it might be. According to a CNN article, half of renters in the United States have found themselves paying more than they can afford following years of surging rents, while 86.5%, about 114.6 million of US households were food secured throughout 2023, and about half of US adults say it's difficult to afford healthcare costs, while 1 in 4 say they or a family member in their household had problems paying for healthcare in the past 12 months. Younger adults, those with lower incomes, adults in fair or poor health, and the uninsured are particularly likely to report problems affording healthcare in the past year. I mean, since 2016, we could see a clear line on how DeVos's and Trump's policy procedures affected black and queer people. Notice how these policies, however, in Trump's campaign kind of hurt the majority.
A consistent theme at his rallies and in interviews.
They talked about the debt for student debt, and they failed on it.
President-elect Trump railing against President Biden for his plan to wipe out up to $20,000 in federal student loan debt per person. In total, he says he's wiped out $175 billion, 0.8 million people. Experts do not expect a Trump White House to continue these programs, big or small.
I would expect that President Biden's pending regulatory loan forgiveness provisions will be dropped on the cutting room floor.
The project calls student loan forgiveness a political ploy. It wants to privatize student loans, and in the meantime, suggests getting rid of forgiveness programs. It just seems like his reforms make things worse for marginalized people while providing extra expenses for students in order to bolster funding for the economy, I guess. When has ever extorting 18-year-olds for their educational decisions ever changed the GDP of this country? Don't we need skilled workers? These are the fields men are going into for money. Our men are becoming kick streamers. Come on. And Trump has successfully marketed this campaign by focusing on attention that is less than 1% of the population and then attacking the 100. Under the guise of culture wars, Trump has managed to hurt more than just marginalized people, you could say. And even though Trump supporters felt they understood his policy positions ahead of this election, in October, more than 9 in 10 Trump supporters, 94%, said he had clearly explained his policies for addressing illegal immigration. Large majority said the same about his policies on the economy and foreign policy. And still we have confusion.
Where is that girl that was all over TikTok saying, yay, Donald Trump won the election, we're gonna have $10 books back?
Just woke up to see that President Trump was reelected, and that means that $10 paperbacks are back on the wet.
Where is she?
I'm sick of the $20 in your favorite kneecap.
You know what's gonna get more expensive? Paper, because of the 25% tariffs that Trump is putting on Canada. You know what paper is made out of? Wood pulp. You know who produces the majority of that? Canada. Who's getting a 25% tariff on every single import from their entire country? Canada.
What Trump did is place tariffs on Chinese imports. By the time the imports get here, China's been paid for the stuff. The American company who brings the goods in pays the tariffs.
Really?
You're kidding right now.
No, I thought he said he was raising the tariffs by 50 to 100% for Chinese imports.
The tariffs are paid by the company that does the importing. So if you want to build a building in the US and you import Chinese steel. You pay China for the steel. You pay the U.S. government the tariff. This is why it's inflationary. Economists have looked at Trump's tariff proposal and said it would make stuff more expensive for Americans by adding the cost of the tariffs to the total cost of production. So that's the way tariffs work. A lot of people don't seem to know how tariffs work, which is sad because this is how people end up getting sucked into Trump's vortex. He says something that sounds good. I'm going to punish China with tariffs. Yeah. In this case, Chinese tariffs. That sounds good. You know, they're paid by the American companies.
Wow.
That's why it's so damaging.
Yeah, I thought they were, though.
They weren't. They're not. Yeah.
So why would he do that? I'm confused.
You'd have to ask him.
Trump's trade policies include implementing tariffs on trading partners like Canada, China, Mexico, and the European Union. The administration said tariffs would benefit American workers, give the U.S. leverage for future trade agreements, and protect national security. However, research from the Brookings Institution shows this did not end up being the case. In fact, research published in early 2024 shows that tariffs put on various goods from China did not increase or decrease the number of jobs in industries they aimed to, but also led to tariffs from other countries as retaliation, which negatively impacted American workers.
You did not win this election. The only people who won are Donald Trump, JD Vance, Elon Musk, the oil barons that they cut deals with in exchange for campaign funds, and the corporations that want to continue deregulating. Your team did not win. You're not on the team. They never gave a shit about you. And unless you're making over $360,000 a year, you're not going to benefit from his tax plan. Like, I'm really interested to see what's going to happen when 2025 comes along. We're a couple months in and your rent prices don't go down, your food prices aren't going down, like you're gonna have more contaminants in your food because the FDA is gonna be completely dismantled. Like, to all the red-pilled mid-20s guys that look like me, I wish I could say that things are gonna get better, that you're gonna be able to afford to move out of your parents' house, that you're gonna be able to afford groceries and not have to struggle to pay bills, but it's just not gonna happen under this presidency, under this new administration.
Let's break down what these tariffs are and how they've affected the economy of the past, since like 94% of y'all think it's a good thing. And I know tariffs have always been a thing. One of the ways governments deal with trading partners they disagree with is through tariffs. A tariff is a tax imposed by one country on the goods and services imported from another country. This is done in order to influence it, raise revenues, or protect competitive advantages. Tariffs are also used to restrict imports. And to put it more simply, they increase the price of goods and services purchased from another country, making them less attractive, meaning that car I was eyeing or something, it might go up by 25%. Now I'm probably looking at getting a car from another source that influenced my decision. And tariffs are an import tax, meaning 25% of what is sent to the US from Canada, Mexico, and China will be added to the combined cost. And since the economy is globalized, you know, a lot of your automobile parts come from Mexico and they go out and are processed in Kentucky. American and European automakers rely on Mexico and Canada for vehicle production. Volkswagen has one of its largest factories in Puebla, Mexico. I'm not the best at pronouncing cars, I'm sorry. Where it produces the Jetta, Teos for US export. Stellantis builds heavy-duty Ram pickup trucks and Jeep Compass in Mexico and has an engine plant there. While the Chrysler Pacifica is produced in Canada and the upcoming Dodge Charger will be as well. Meaning that if you put tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and Chinese goods, all of a sudden you're gonna have a pretty big problem of supply and demand specifically for the country targeted. Avoiding tariffs would require huge capital investment, not only to build a new plant or retool an existing one in the US, but also to move the machinery and train a new workforce. With less than 2 months until inauguration day, it would be nearly impossible for automakers and other importing goods from these countries to react. And even if they had the time, companies would still have to pass those additional costs on to consumers, or risk being uncompetitive in a very price-driven market. Around a week ago, at the point of recording, Justin Trudeau met up with Donald Trump in order to discuss his idea of tariffs. You're probably wondering how I got here. Welcome to my Baka life. If tariffs do go into effect, car buyers could see reduced choices in marketplaces, higher prices, or both. This goes the same with food and oil. It's possible that vehicles built elsewhere, even in the US, could see increases as a result of automakers having to spread the burden of tariffs. Because the United States is the economic center of the world, countries will be forced to go tit for tat or have their economy eviscerated. Justin Trudeau said, these tariffs will destroy Canada. And you know what Trump said? Let's colonize you. And you know what Canadian citizens said? And that's the root issue of my video. I'm gonna be real for a second though. I can't wholeheartedly, just like as a person, a citizen of this land, watch this dumpster fire of our country be fanned by men who are profiting from it. What I find between America, Canada, and Mexico is common ground. All of us as citizens have been exploited for a very long time. All of us are sick and tired of not being able to afford our basic needs. All of us want houses, cars, happy lives, and spouses, but the barrier of entry is limited by a price tag, right? So why across party lines are we seeing Donald Trump clones springing up? This is Pierre Poilievre from the UCP party.
There are 4.9 million people here temporarily that are supposed to leave by December 31st of next year, 13 months from now. 4.9 million people. He admits that there have been 2 ISIS terrorists allowed into our country. What is the plan to protect our security and reinstate sovereignty over who is in our country?
He's been seen glazing Trump and very much leading popular polling. For context, Canada for 8 years has been under a liberal government which hasn't been meeting the needs of its citizens adequately. And just like Trump, Poilievre fosters hate. Across party lines, one thing is certain. This election, the Conservatives were intensely focused on culture wars.
What you're going to hear tonight is a detailed and dangerous plan called Project 2025 that the former president intends on implementing if he were elected again. I believe very strongly that the American people want a president who understands the importance of bringing us together, knowing we have so much more in common than what separates us, and I pledge to you to be a president for all Americans.
President Trump will give you a minute here to respond.
Number one, I have nothing to do, as you know, and as she knows better than anyone, I have nothing to do with Project 2025.
They're still unclear, but Trump has repeatedly promised to carry out what he calls the largest deportation operation in American history once he takes office.
Everybody knows I'm an open book. Everybody knows what I'm going to do. Cut taxes very substantially and create a great economy like I did before.
While the left, like the Democrats, tend to shy away from them. Trump supporters were unified on several cultural issues in polling conducted over the course of the year. Among those that they generally agreed on, 92% believed that biological sex is not mutable. Just 7% said a person can be a man or a woman, even if that is different from the sex they were assigned at birth. 89% said gun ownership does more to increase than decrease safety. 83% viewed the criminal justice system as not tough enough on criminals. 75% did not think the legacy of slavery affects the position of black people in American society today, much or at all. And this isn't to bat for a party which had one of the worst campaigns in the world. It doesn't help that it was done at the last minute by black women. Let's not pretend that identity wasn't a factor. This was an uphill battle. The Confederate ghosts of Mount Rushmore sing the tales of white America. It's really nothing new. Along with the incompetence of a president who is actively being marketed as small being who can't function with the... You could probably put a drama teacher beside these candidates and win. I was kidding, Trudeau. I mean, Canada did it, why not? My confusion, however, comes with Donald Trump's glee when he says, America has given us an unprecedented and powerful mandate. Many media outlets echo these claims by describing his victory as a landslide, resounding, and sweeping. But by historical standards, Trump's victory is unimpressive. Consider the following. His margin of victory in the popular vote, which will be at most 1.6 percentage points when all the votes are counted, is the 5th smallest of the 32 presidential races held since the 1900s. However, by way of Nick Fuentes, Andrew Tate, and right-wing men in frat house partying, you would think that this was the second coming of like conservative Jesus, you'd think. Like fucking Ronald Reagan just came up and like a Michael Jackson music video Ronald Reagan collab. Election exit polls found that he had a favorability rating of just 48%. 44% of voters had a very unfavorable view, suggesting that he has a limited political upside. As evident with the backlash of this election.
This is a PSA for any of the ladies that have been seriously concerned.
But if the numbers are so staggeringly against Trump, my question is, what won Trump the election? Ding! My question brought me here. It seemed a lot of Trump supporters pushed for him because of his stances on immigration and economy at 82 and 93% respectively, which is concerning because of what we said about tariffs earlier. Remember how we said that was going to destroy you? However, sometimes America doesn't need hope. Sometimes societies don't need hope. What was tangible about Trump's campaign was how he appealed to a public zeitgeist.
No serious country should be telling its children that they were born with the wrong gender.
It's mainly the Joe Rogan podcast because, you know, you have the interviewer asking like unbiased questions, real questions that are coming from viewers, and they answer it genuinely heart to heart.
Oh, Donald Trump wishes the South won.
That's right. He loves Robert.
They love to take things out of context and distort things.
Well, they don't even have to take them out. They make them up entirely. Okay,
They do
make
that
them,
too. You promised to end birthright citizenship on day one. Is that still your plan?
Yeah, absolutely.
The 14th Amendment, though, says that, quote, all persons born in the United States are citizens. Can you get around the 14th Amendment with an executive
we're going to have to
action?
get a change. We'll maybe have to go back to the people, but we have to end it.
Trump's identity is what resonated most and least with voters. In order to create a better picture of how all these nuanced versions of harms could form up in bills, I want to relate Trump's campaign strategy to that of the past. If you've realized, on the educational and economic sector, Trump uses terms like immigration and DEI to demerit the very real problems of an ailing system.
Some of your own supporters, including Republicans on Capitol Hill, have labeled Vice President Kamala Harris, who is the first Black and Asian American woman to serve as vice president and be on a major party ticket, as a DEI hire. Is that acceptable language to you?
How do you define DEI? Go ahead. Give me a definition.
Sir, I'm asking you a question, a very direct question.
Define it for me, if you would.
I just defined it, sir. Do you believe that Vice President Kamala Harris is only on the ticket because she is a Black woman?
Well, I can say, no, I think it's maybe a little bit different. She was always of Indian heritage, and she was only promoting Indian heritage.
It's a direct question, sir. Do you believe that Vice President Kamala Harris is a DEI hire, as some Republicans
really don't
have
know.
said?
I mean, I really don't know. Could be.
I think this is atrocious, and I think we have an obligation to call this out when we see it. No, this isn't a video defending politicians who have the backing of billionaires, but the fact of the matter is, between the two, the public didn't want a well-respected Republican because Kamala lost. Trump's campaign marketing of himself is part of a bigger zeitgeist, a bigger whole of nationalistic rhetoric being normalized. What I'm saying is, Donald Trump uses the same social commonalities in order to tie his campaign together, rooted in the same messaging and rhetoric that came with the landscape of everyday society.
How did it happen here? There's no systemic discrimination. There's no system in Quebec.
Thank God that we're different than the United States.
Their denial is part of the system.
You know, Donald Trump doesn't have to hop on and yell about immigration issues and things like that and be seen as more of like a hospitable figure.
I've been in recovery most of the last 10 years.
How did you get addicted?
No, I would just do coke. That was really, so not just, yeah.
That's down and dirty, right?
Yeah, it started to make me feel like I was a mechanic or something.
So you're way up with cocaine more than anything else you can think of.
It'll turn you into a damn owl, homie. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You'll be out on your own porch, you know, and you'll be your own street lamp. You're fucking.
And is that a good feeling?
No.
So it's not even good during what would be normally the good time, in other words.
In my point of view, that makes podcasts a bit more satiable and tangible for the right, especially for undecided voters.
Did you watch the interview?
Yeah, dude.
What'd you think? Fucking 10
I think there were
out of 10?
some great questions that were missed. Mushrooms?
Yeah.
Yo!
You getting into shroom talk with Trump would have been legendary.
I wanted to ask about Andrew Tate. Steiny said no. And
Why
then
would
the
you
guy,
say no to
the guy
that?
actually told me after, he's like, you should have asked him. He
didn't
talks
say
about
no.
Andrew Tate a lot.
But in your point of view, what have you seen?
It's really insidious because what has happened, and you know, something that I think I kind of like felt to an extent over the last couple of years, but I didn't quite fully grasp what was happening. I think a lot of us did.
A $10,000 suit. It's tailored by the best tailors in London.
Tailors in the world, not London. Get it right. Get it.
It's even funnier because he pronounces it with the ER thing.
Because it seems so obvious, but you forget how like the level of critical thinking and like critical analysis of media is so low for like the average person. It's incredibly low by design. So these podcasts are really a perfect weapon for subterfuging is the incredible way to like sneak in like right-wing ideology, or better yet, to pull ideologies further right, without having people confront like contradictions in the politics.
I'm married to the daughter of immigrants. I do think that immigration can enrich this country. I do think that, you know, immigrants, many of them are bringing a lot of to the table, but we have to be honest with ourselves that permitting 500,000 immigrants in a society like ours is much different than permitting 5 million or 50 million immigrants. And importantly, where are the immigrants coming from? What are their values? What are their economic skills? There's something.
What's their criminal record?
What's their criminal record? There's something.
Good luck diving into the world of politics, of explicit electoral politics. It is a cold world of people that are not necessarily the most reasonable. So good luck.
It all starts here in 1828. Remember how I said the ghosts of Confederacy echo through time? That might have been my thesis statement. See, I think Donald Trump took advantage of a long history of Southern strategy.
Republican governor-elect of Virginia made critical race theory in schools the linchpin of his campaign. Even though it isn't even taught in Virginia schools, the issue of education proved extremely potent among white voters. Now Republicans across the country are trying to repeat his success, making education their new Southern strategy.
I mean, it's noted that one of the most American things you can be is against political figures who sap resources, from expelling the British to expelling CEOs with pies, because I don't want to visit. That's not the one that I was talking. To even as anciently rooted as Abraham Lincoln's disdain for the establishment of political parties in themselves. It's always been around.
It's true, the Republican Party has grown incredibly from where it was, and a whole different group of people in the Republican Party. Like, people don't remember, nobody ever heard of it until I came along. Nobody remembered it for a long time, or they didn't use it. At least I use it all the time. Abraham Lincoln was a Republican. You know, you say that, people say, I didn't know that, but he was a Republican. So we're doing a great job, but that's a beautiful job. I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
In that ancient disdain is also where our stage is set, in 1828. See, Donald Trump pulls from a long history of codified messaging, hailing from the culture of the Conservative Party. Make America Great Again was famously used by Reagan and George Bush, who would go on to be presidents, who, like Donald Trump, used an ideation of American identity.
For those who've abandoned hope, we'll restore hope and we'll welcome them into a great national crusade to make America great again.
An American courage stirring in our souls. I say these words to you tonight. We will make America powerful again. We will make America wealthy again. We will make America strong again. We will make America proud again. We will make America safe again. And we will make America great again. Thank you all.
Make America Great Again implies that America was great, and we have to find ways in order to get back there. Ronald Reagan used this idea of a flaw of American heritage and plugged in anti-drug doctrine, codified into a stance against drug usage in the 90s, famously utilizing a campaign focused on economic reform.
America has accomplished so much in these last few years, whether it's been rebuilding our economy or serving the cause of freedom in the world. What we've been able to achieve has been done with your help, with us working together as a nation united. Now we need your support again. Drugs are menacing our society. They're threatening our values and undercutting our institutions. They're killing our children.
Reagan, who took office in 1981, enacted sweeping changes that would completely reshape the American economy and society. The introduction of his divisive Reaganomics, which provided massive tax cuts to the wealthiest Americans, would stagnate wages, increase national debt, and create one of the largest income equality gaps in the industrialized world. At the end of the day, these changes only gave more money to the rich instead of evening out the playing field like they were intended to. According to Statista research, the top 1% of the nation's earners have seen their share of the nation's income rise from 8.6% in 1989 to 13.9% in 2023, while the poorest, 50% of Americans, have seen their share of the nation's wealth decrease from 3.5 to 2.6. The parallels to the Trump campaign are almost one-to-one. Trump, utilizing the cultural fabric of America, is telling the audience in the same way, we can be great again, while alluding to mass deportation events in the same way Ronald Reagan alluded to mass incarceration.
Today our cities are flooded with illegal aliens. Americans are being squeezed out of the labor force and their jobs are taken. By the way, you know who's taking the jobs that are created? 107% of those jobs are taken by illegal aliens. And you know who's being hurt the most by millions of people pouring into our country?
For many years, we have tolerated in America, not just in the illegal and highly dangerous drug traffic, but in many other areas, a syndicate of organized criminals whose power is now reaching unparalleled heights. Today, the power of organized crime reaches into every segment of our society. The time has come to cripple the power of the mob in America. We will establish 12 additional task forces in key areas in the United States.
All while proposing economic reforms which suit the billionaires to the right and left of him.
And they're also taking them from unions. The unions are suffering because of it.
As thousands of workers take part in the Make Amazon Pay strike. From now until Cyber Monday, workers in more than 20 countries are expected to protest, urging Amazon to increase wages and allow workers to unionize.
Ask him why. Also, I have to say shout out to Unsung History for the free learning on Spotify. Y'all should tune into them. However, in the beginnings of Republican culture, you know, good old 1828, good old, or however it is in the Taylor Swift song, I don't know. The Republican Party tended to lean away from the more brutal image of slavery the Democrats of the South very much represented in form, you could say. It was a little swapped from the modern day connotations of black rights that the Democrats thinly veil themselves in nowadays, you could say. It was a little swap. All you gotta know is the whole of America was in the business of playing God with black lives. The Confederacy was basically if you took like Hitler and gave him the Sims. The Republican Party still prioritized expansion, which came at the detriment of indigenous peoples on their own land, and used harmful industrial means of indentured servitude in factories. Notably though, the first podcast equivalent of a culture war started with Abraham Lincoln and the Southern states. See, since slavery was a thing and a lot of people thought, hey, maybe black people could have like a smidgen of humanity, maybe we should free them, question mark. And a lot of these people, like prison abolitionists, saw their hope in the Republican Party, while those from the South, being from the Democratic Party, shared a commitment to Thomas Jefferson's concept of a farming society. They viewed the central government as the enemy of individual liberty. Because most Democrats were in southern states, they fought to keep slavery legal. But sadly, now Lincoln had a problem. See, the South kinda worked off slaves, right? And now he had a party full of abolitionists telling him to stop slavery. But Lincoln, fearing the destruction of the Union, decided to court the plantation owners of the South. It kind of went something like this.
If we come up with something, we're going to do it and we're going to replace it.
You still do not have a plan.
I have concepts of a plan. There are concepts and options we have to do that.
However, a lot of everyday history is watered down with its modern day connotations, you know, Republican, liberal, Jill Stein for vague reasons. Abraham Lincoln saw freeing the slaves as a strategic strategy. The North were more so industrialist, meaning they operated in creating factories instead of plantations. In an open letter to President Lincoln published on August 20th, under the heading, The Prayer of 20 Millions, Greeley urged Lincoln to recognize slavery as the root cause of the war and act boldly with regard to emancipation. For context, Greeley published this in the New York Tribune, where writers like Karl Marx and Engels cooperated to make an almost political Bible for America. So Abraham Lincoln being called out after letting the South keep their slaves, after a civil war where slavery was actively being fought for by its black combatants, was like getting quote tweeted by Wizard Bassan after you went to a Palestine protest. Actually, not after you went to a Palestine protest, after you were the head organizer of that. It was a dire situation. Because let's not forget that Lincoln led the North against the South in the Civil War. So Lincoln doing this balancing act, you know, constantly reverting back to saving the Union, well, you could see where this is gonna go next. Although he already had a draft Emancipation Proclamation prepared, Lincoln responded with his own open letter to Greeley, which he published in the National Intelligencer in Washington, D.C. Lincoln stated plainly that the goal of his administration's policies, including those related to slavery, was to save the Union. My paramount object in the struggle is to save the Union, and is not either to save or to destroy slavery. If I could save the Union without freeing any slave, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing all the slaves, I would do it. And if I could do it by freeing some and leaving others alone, I would also do that. Lincoln carefully noted that this represented his official position. After all, the South had a lot of profit from its exploitation of black people, which went to the whole of the Americas. We have to note that Lincoln also wanted to restrict economic power from spreading to the West and keeping it centralized in the North's factories. And you know, after this back and forth culture war ended, you know, the Civil War, and the Republicans won. In a normative environment of ethics, you can tell how there was a lot of tension in the air between like black and white people, because it's like, what did we just fight this war for? You know, white people didn't really feel the need to help formerly enslaved people anymore, because they thought the Emancipation Proclamation was just it, you know. Since they were free, they didn't need help anymore. This debacle of race would go on to shape American politics for the next 44 years. By the 1970s, many in the Republican Party felt that they had done enough for black citizens and stopped all efforts to reform the southern states.
The black man in America was an exile in his own country. Racism denied jobs, education, political power, and many of the other rights and privileges of citizenship. In the South, this national problem was most severe. Black and white were rigorously segregated, and segregation was protected by law, custom, violence, and the threat of violence. There was little hope for change.
The South was left to the white Democrats and their oppressive policies towards the black citizens after the Compromise of 1877, which ended Reconstruction. With the end of Reconstruction, the Solid South voted for Democratic presidential candidates for the next 44 years. Under the new America created after the Civil War, the Democrat Party became the party of the KKK. The next 44 years that would ensue contained the rise of policing explicitly meant to jail and kill black people in what would later be known as our prisons.
The 13th Amendment is thought to have abolished slavery, but it actually, in a sense, solidified it with a loophole that allowed servitude to people who were convicted of crimes. This was largely used as a means to control newly freed slaves, and it has evolved into what we call today the criminal justice system. Remember, southern states relied on slavery for their economic system, and once it was abolished, they still needed to find ways to make up for the loss of free labor. So what did they do? Those states revised their slave codes and created black codes which made various acts illegal if the individual charged was black. Things such as possessing a firearm, supposedly a Second Amendment right, or arresting a black man for not having a job. This often forced former slaves to take a job with their former owner. Eventually, prisons were built and started earning massive profits, upping the demand for the commodity of free black labor. This supply would be further ramped up by Ronald Reagan's war on drugs.
And not only that, segregationist policies would also create disparaging racial effects like pseudo-detached societies called suburbs for white people, with the act of white flight and the desegregation of neighborhoods and schools. Throughout the years, these white Southerners benefiting from these systems of racial inequality reliably voted for the Democratic Party because the system benefited the specific race bracket of white people. This is important to note because all of a sudden, the black vote switched from 23% to 71% with FDR after the introduction of the New Deal. See, the Great Depression was a moment of class consciousness, and no one had it worse than black workers. So showing them policy change can bring economic benefit gave black Americans a baka incentive.
Ernest Bean is one of these porters. His job provides a stable income through the Depression, but it comes at a price.
Black journalist Thomas Fleming observed, "A porter had the best job in his community.
A lot of the New Deal's money was going to white people, but damn, it was a baka incentive. This is important to note because Richard Nixon, the adopter of the Dixie campaign, which we'll talk about later, at first was open to running with a civil rights platform until being beat by John F. Kennedy. We can surmise that the Republican Party was very much influenced by the culture wars of their time too, be it with civil rights.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Vice President of the United States, Richard M. Nixon.
I want to talk to you for a moment about civil rights, equal rights for all our citizens. Why must we vigorously defend them? First, because it is right and just. And second, because we cannot compete successfully with communism if we fail to utilize completely the minds and energies of all of our citizens.
See, the Republicans saw the Democrat campaign strategy built on civil rights as unmoving, seeing the trust that the black vote had garnished over the years, especially with the New Deal policy. And at the time, the civil rights campaign strategy was very effective because, unfortunately, there's black people everywhere, sadly.
The whole world is watching us. When we fail to grant equality to all, that makes news, bad news for America all over the world.
However, John F. Kennedy still ended up winning this election.
John F. Kennedy
The state of Massachusetts has received for President of the United States 303 votes. Richard M. Nixon of the state of California has received 219 votes.
So the Republicans, well, in a direct quote from the then Arizona senator, they weren't going to win the black vote, so they ought to go hunting where the ducks are, and thus began Operation Dixie, starting with the nominee named Goldwater. In an attempt to garnish votes from a voting base that was affected by the culture wars of segregation at that time, instead of leaning into the civil rights platform, they started listening to the segregationists, the white segregationists. Goldwater decided to go against the Civil Rights Act. See, black people were already free. Why do we need to give them more civil rights? Well, I mean, we already freed them. What, segregation, it doesn't really do much. You can get up. That was Goldwater's strategy.
What I remember most about the 64 campaign was the 64 Civil Rights Act. My dad had been a Republican all his life. And in 64, he switched. And he voted for Johnson, and he became a Democrat because Goldwater was against the 64 Civil Rights Act.
Are you concerned perhaps about the Democrats taking advantage of
In an attempt to garnish votes from a voting base that was affected by the culture wars of segregation at that time, he went against the Civil Rights Act.
Approval to what we were fighting for racial integration. Well, with the schools, there was a 10-year period when the country didn't follow through on it.
You have said, I believe, that we have no right to tell the southern states what they must do about school integration. I can't understand this statement. Do you mean to say the Supreme Court decision is null and void?
No, the Supreme Court decision is not necessarily the law of the land. The Constitution still is. They interpreted by that action that it was wrong to have segregation. Now, they didn't spell out what was to be done.
Conservatives did not feel that it was something that the federal government should legislate on.
Conservative cultures rely on the backwards notions of a national America in order to work. So reaching out for a national whiteness in the form of curated fear, in the form of curated outrage, it's effective.
Is this what President Johnson means when he says we are much beloved? Well, I don't like to see our flag torn down and trampled upon anywhere in the world. And I think most Americans agree with me on that. I don't like to see American citizens pushed around. And there's no good reason for letting it happen. All this results from weak, vacillating leadership. We must show the world that we are a mature and responsible people, aware of our rights as well as our responsibilities. Just as soon as we do this, we will resume our rightful role of world leadership, which this administration has let go by default.
In your heart, you know he's right. Vote for Barry Goldwater.
However, this time Goldwater would thankfully lose, winning 5 states in the South, but ultimately losing the presidency. However, the Republicans completed their goal. They stoked racial fear to such a degree that Lyndon B. Johnson's presidency was threatened. And then it was the summer of 1964, and Lyndon Johnson was scared. See, if you remember, it was John Kennedy who beat Richard Nixon at first, but then John Kennedy was assassinated. In his place, Lyndon B. Johnson had big shoes to fill, having just achieved one of the greatest congressional victories in history by passing the Civil Rights Act over the strident objections of his native South. Johnson was now confronted by black riots in several urban centers. He feared that his Republican opponent, Barry Goldwater, would exploit the racial turmoil by appealing to the white backlash. Would the racial politics cause Lyndon Johnson the White House over Goldwater? Both Johnson and Goldwater would face several tests of their character in the long election season of 1964. Tests involving the CRA, riots, the George Wallace candidacy, the segregationists who almost won.
I draw the line in the dust and toss the gauntlet before the feet of tyranny, and I say segregation now, segregation tomorrow, and segregation forever.
And the white backlash. The election of 1964 is considered by many to be the most racially polarized presidential contest in modern American history. And as such, it is seen as a watershed in the evolution of our two-party system in recent times.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. These are the stakes. To make a world in which all of God's children can live, or to go into the dark. We must either love each other, or we must die.
Vote for President Johnson on November 3rd. The stakes are too high for you to stay home.
Yet what has been missed in previous analyses of 1964 is just how both Goldwater and Johnson worked to take race off the agenda. Both parties. Johnson believed that if the election became a referendum on civil rights, he might lose. Goldwater believed that history would judge him harshly if his campaign blatantly exploited the racial hatred of white people. Still, despite these efforts, the racial implications of the 1964 campaign would linger for decades. The first Southerner to occupy the White House for more than 100 years lost the heart of his region, signaling the dawn of an era of Republican dominance of the South in presidential politics. Seeing the potential a campaign like Goldwater's could provide, Richard Nixon hit the sonic rubbing hand. He stole Goldwater's flow, fam. Richard Nixon went on to famously recruit segregationists, including a Maryland governor who had famously berated civil rights leaders after riots.
He is the man who earned and proudly carries the title of Mr. Conservative. And he is the man who, after the greatest campaign in history, will be Mr. President. Barry Goldwater.
What this election did was solidify the Republicans as the candidacy for white rights and the Democrats as a party for civil rights. However, I think Goldwater would be very surprised as to how politics has shaken up in the modern day.
I don't know just why they wanted to call this a confession. I certainly don't feel guilty about being a Republican. I've always been a Republican. My father is, his father was, the whole family is a Republican family. I voted for Dwight Eisenhower the first time I ever voted. I voted for Nixon the last time. But when we come to Senator Goldwater, it seems to me we're up against a very different kind of a man. This man scares me. Now, maybe I'm wrong. A friend of mine has said to me, listen, just because a man sounds a little irresponsible during a campaign doesn't mean he's going to act irresponsibly. You know that theory that the White House makes the man. I don't buy that. You know what I think makes a president? I mean, aside from his judgment, his experience, are the men behind him, his advisors, the cabinet. And so many men with strange ideas are working for Goldwater. You'll hear a lot about what these guys are against. They seem to be against just about everything, but what are they for? The hardest thing for me about this whole campaign is to sort out one Goldwater statement from another. A reporter will go to Senator Goldwater and he'll say, Senator, on such and such a day you said, and I quote, blah, 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 whatever it is, end quote. And then Goldwater says, well, I wouldn't put it that way. I can't follow that. Was he serious when he did put it that way? Is he serious when he says he wouldn't put it that way? I just don't get it. A president ought to mean what he says.
Do you feel like it is a historical piece, or do you feel like it resonates with the Republican Party race or anything else in politics right now?
I'm sorry to say I think it does. Because I look at the Republican contenders and I say to myself, this is the cream of the crop? You gotta be kidding me.
As the Republican Party would go on to parrot Goldwater's strategy. The whole time, Richard Nixon denied that they were following a Southern strategy.
Some aspects of black power are very disturbing to us because it means revolution. It means violence. But other aspects of black power are very constructive because it means that black people, they want to stand on their own feet. They want to have black banks and not just go to white banks. They want to have black businesses and not just go to the white businesses. And they should have.
Even though people close to him, like Thurmond, said if Nixon became president, he has promised he won't enforce either the Civil Rights or the Voting Rights Acts. Stick with him. However, there was a problem. Remember the segregationalist George Wallace? He was running on an independent campaign. His ideals were ingrained in normality of social degradation at that time. That's basically academic for saying he liked the idea of lynchings, okay? And that won him the Deep South in 1968, even though Nixon won much of the rest of the South. What this proved was that strategy kind of worked. So in 1972, when Wallace stopped running and no one was there to oppose Nixon, he swept the Confederacy with the same messaging, winning 80% of the white vote in the South, with Wallace voters voting for Nixon at a 3-1 because of Nixon's pander. I'm seeing some parallels with Trump. Donald Trump has warned that if Joe Biden replaces him as the president, the suburbs will be flooded with low-income housing. He's backed supporters who has sometimes violently clashed with Black Lives Matters protesters across the country.
No one will be safe in Biden's America. I can't even call it Biden's America.
Continue to hammer that issue, then hammer home the law and order message, saying that he's going to restore some kind of law and order in the city.
Protesters, you know what I say? Protesters, your ass.
That race is tightening up, and I think it's tightening up largely because of the focus that cannot be ignored on the unrest and violence in the cities.
It's a pitch aimed in part at suburban women voters, drumming up fears violent protests could end up at their doorstep.
The U.S. president has even refrained from directly condemning the actions of a teenager charged with killing 2 protesters in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Trump has also called the BLM movement a symbol of hate. With such rhetoric, the president is taking a page or two out of the 1960s Southern strategy, the playbook Republican politicians such as Richard Nixon and Barry Goldwater used to rally political support among white voters across the South by leveraging racism and white fear of people of color. But Trump's own version of the Southern strategy is an updated one for 2020. It's not a carbon copy. And yet the president has mixed this angle with other pitches to voters.
So you're going to now vote for Trump? Because let me tell you, Kamala is never going to be doing that. Kamala doesn't know she's alive. If you watched her being interviewed by Allison Cooper the other night, who's a nice person. Do you know Allison Cooper? CNN fake news. Oh, she said, no, his name's Anderson. Oh, no. If you watch that interview, you would never want her as your president. She couldn't answer the simplest question.
Yet as tensions over police and protests have increased across America, Trump has increasingly made these arguments the centerpiece of his campaign in the closing months of this election. He's throwing gasoline on the fire. He knows what he's doing. He's making a political calculus that by stoking the worst parts of the American psyche, that he can somehow gain political leverage from that, said Isaac Wright, a Democrat strategist who specialized in rural campaigns and Southern voters. Wright pointed to when neo-Nazis marched through Charlottesville. The president defensively said that they were very fine people among both the marchers and the counter-marchers. I think this is what he did in 2016. He's just becoming more blatant and more open of who he is and what he's doing, Wright said. The Southern strategy was a plan used effectively by Nixon to increase voting among white voters in the South. Nixon's campaign put a heavy emphasis on law and order and states' rights to attract white voters concerned about racial integration. Critics argued the language used in the strategy was a thinly veiled appeal to racists and an ugly response to the success of the civil rights movement. Trump going rally after rally showing immigration chart after immigration chart may have won him a majority of the Southern states, as displayed with the jump scare election image everyone's been memeing. Oh my God, my buckle. But his strategy with podcasts is more of a soft flex of power. Podcast audience have evolved since the start of the pandemic, according to Gabriel Soto, the senior director of research at Edison Research, a firm that's been tracking podcast data since 2006. While audiences are disproportionately composed of people with higher degrees and incomes, urban liberal types, recent years have seen an influx of podcasts for listeners without college degrees, and in particular, young men. More importantly, Edison's research over the summit found that 19% of regular podcast listeners were undecided voters. That's an obvious target for the Trump campaign, which has honed in on uneducated and politically disengaged young men as a key demographic in its effort to defeat Vice President Kamala Harris. It's very simple. These are people who could vote, potentially, and are not your regulars watching TV news or even Fox News, but they do tune into these emergent podcasts, a Republican strategist close to the Trump campaign said, speaking under the condition of anonymity to discuss the behind-the-scenes strategy. When you're in primetime television, you're limited to the things you can say, and you gotta brush up on your statements. But when it comes to a podcast, many times it's a more casual environment where you can express what your favorite pizza is and make yourself more relatable to the American people. The same Trump that was yelling, deport all the immigrants in all of his rallies and having his backwards ideations of governance with tariffs, elected officials, sexual assault scandals, lawsuits for almost starting a coup d'etat, can now be pacified in a realistic setting.
And the thing that, like, so there's this ongoing discourse still about how the left is failing men or the left is failing people because yada, yada, yada. A lot of stuff that's, you know, if you squint from a certain angle, you see the kernel of truth in it.
If you are a lefty, you are weak. You're drinking your soy lattes, you weigh 9 stone, you're vegan. It's all...
But the thing that's always ignored is that people present this political reality as if everybody is born into politics naked. And then they just objectively look at group A and group B. They look at the left and the right with absolutely no biases and then choose based off what they observe, right? And the reality is we live in a conservative nation where conservative values and ideology and principles and aesthetics are not just standard, but dominant by a wide margin.
Hundreds of Confederate battle flags flew in
The investigation into the high school massacre is slow-moving and dangerous. The 2 gunmen who went on the rampage,
so a person that thinks they're unbiased is really already like 65, 70% biased towards rightward thinking and rightward ideology. And so the podcast starts there. It starts there, and they just seem like normal guys. Theo Von's just a normal guy, just an all shucks white guy with a mullet from Jump-a-Bump, Georgia, etc. And don't get me wrong, I do think Theo Von represents normal white guys. I don't think Theo Von is actively racist or actively anti-black or anti-LGBTQ or anti-immigrant, etc. But he is a standard issue white guy in America, which is going to give you 70% right wing. And so then you pull in these further right wing figures who get to be normal in public, and it makes their very abnormal stuff. If Theo Von, I've been saying this for years, like, we hate Joe Rogan, right? If Joe Rogan were the worst white guy, I think I told you this before, if the worst a white guy's politics could be were Joe Rogan, think about how much better the world would be. You know what I'm saying? Like, think about if the worst at baseline was an anti-vax libertarian. You know what I'm saying? Because Joe Rogan, I don't think supports Israel. You know what I'm saying? Like there's so much that sense of normalcy gets to be their baseline, and then you add Jordan Peterson, Donald Trump, and all these people, and they have calm, normal conversations. And I think, I being now a random, standard issue white guy, I think I'm unbiased. I think that I'm normal. I think I'm objectively looking at these two things. I don't know the inherent biases that have been entrenched in me for most of my life. This Jordan Peterson guy sings perfectly fine. You know what?
On October the 7th, you tweeted, "Give them hell, Netanyahu. Enough is enough," and you got some blowback for that, as everybody
Yeah, a lot.
says.
Or maybe it is the Palestinians. I don't know which side they're on. But you get my point, though.
No, I do get your point, because Jordan Peterson's from the University of Alberta.
When I grew up in northern Alberta, and there were no Jews up there at all.
Like, I'm sorry for that. Like, Jordan Peterson.
That is y'all fault. Y'all did that.
Yeah, the sort of civil politeness that he backs on. Because as I was looking at the demographics too, I don't really want to blame demographics, because even looking at those demographics sometimes it's such a bad way of even correlating tangible political thought, even in the civil rights era with people voting against Goldwater. You think all those votes, if we just tally them side to side, were strictly for segregation? They were for some type of idea of segregation that Goldwater contributed in an aspect of normalcy that everyone wanted in the South, right? When we talk about systemic clauses, especially at a national level, they often come from the same aspects of ingrained thinking that people before have, like in Canada. It's oil. We have to protect oil. We have to protect us because we're hard workers and we work for oil. But what that's done is it's
In the battle between Alberta and Ottawa, fighting words are a renewable resource. We're fighting.
Yeah, our housing market has been bought out. The Albertan governments and at the border is thinking of working with Donald Trump and setting up all of these clauses that Donald Trump has out for the government because immigration is so high, all of this stuff. So in my point of view, I'm just more so very dissuaded by politics, if anything, because I do a lot of on the grounds organizing. I'm thankful for the on grounds organizers here too, and I voted NDP and things like that. You know what I mean? Just because the people in my circles were telling me this is a big election for queer people, and they were very much right. It's actually getting very scary here in Canada too, which is actually kind of wild. It's the result of your U.S. politics, but
you all are getting our stench on you.
Yeah,
that's why if I leave, I'm not going to Canada. I'm going to New Zealand or something. I don't know.
Yeah,
somewhere where there's also, but New Zealand probably going to get caught up in climate catastrophe. So I don't know where we're going. I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah. So the future with politics, specifically electoral politics, do you have any hope with voting or organizing around a liberal party?
So around the Democrats? No.
Mm-hmm.
My goal was to get the Democrats to kill the Republicans once and for all. I genuinely thought very foolishly that Kamala was going to win. And despite very valid criticisms and reasons to not vote for Kamala, all of which I agree with, I was like, that is long-term a better situation. If we could just eliminate the overt foaming at the mouth fascism from off the board, maybe we could get people organized to deal with like this sneaky neoliberal fascism that we've become very comfortable with. I don't know if that was wise, but it doesn't matter because they lost. And in the aftermath of their loss, it doesn't feel like anything was learned. I think I skeeted because I'm on Blue Sky now. I skeeted out the other day that the Democrats lost and then just decided to run out the clock in the game. Like they lost, and like we haven't seen or heard from anybody in the last 2-3 months or however long it's been. I guess a month and a half almost. As if like there's not still things that could be done. So it kind of just shows who they are, right? I don't think there's going to be a lot of value in like getting behind them. I didn't think there was a lot of value now. And I don't think, I definitely not going to be like, let's spend the next 4 years or however many years uplifting the Democratic Party. The next 4 years or however many years should be used to develop whatever political mechanisms that we can access to actually challenge them for power. And if that's not ready in 4 years, then we go 8 years, then we go to, like that's the reality of the situation. And I do have hope because this is an assessment of where we actually are on the left that I think we expect it to not be as negative as it was. And that's why I did that video about like why did Trump win, because I felt like the left wasn't looking at this with like a sobering like perspective. People were like, she lost because of Palestine. Like, no, she didn't. She didn't lose because of Palestine. That should tell you something. You know what I'm saying? She lost because she ran to the right. No, not really. She didn't really lose because she ran to the right. That should tell you something. Like, these are lessons for us to take in as to where we actually are and how we should be working and how we should be talking to people. If we weren't in a position at what seemed like a very critical, moment where we had a lot of attention, we had protests nationwide on college campuses about Palestine, and it still didn't move the needle on the regular everyday Americans. That's because we're losing the propaganda war on so many levels. That's because the right has successfully turned trans bodies into like vectors of political power. You know what I'm saying? Where that was what you ask people, why didn't they vote for Kamala? They say because trans people. It's like, you know what I'm saying? So like that speaks to where we actually are. Thus, we need to be like engaging in real work that has tangible results, making plans around those results, etc. And I don't think that includes the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party is going to they've already made efforts to abandon their more further left entities, and their further left entities, aside from a small few, have shown themselves to be, very compromised. So everybody should be organizing locally. They should be trying to amplify, outsider voices. And best case scenario is you build enough power, because this, so Trump's presidency will be 4 years long. I'm not as sucked into the fear mongering of a Trump presidency and what he's going to cause a lot of harm, don't get me wrong, but fundamentally he's incompetent, and he's surrounded himself with incompetence.
The WWE senator elect,
right?
I was very confused.
Right.
Yeah.
So I expect this to be very painful for a lot of American people, and I expect a lot of American people to be looking to, swing the over to window back over. And the best case scenario, if we want to do anything with the Democrats, is that we will have built up such a strong apparatus of power that they ignored us in this election cycle. They said, y'all can't speak at the convention. These pro-Palestine people, no, y'all can't talk. We don't want to talk to y'all. Y'all don't have any reason. There was no reason for it. So we put them in a position where they then feel like, well, we can't do that this time around. But I don't have a lot of hope for that. I don't have a lot of hope for 2028. I think we should be working so that once we get to 2028, we're looking at 2032 like, all right, this is it. I'll be 50 and I will not be out here. I will not be outside. But I'll be rooting for y'all. You know what I'm saying? So yeah.
Thank you again for hopping on and having this conversation with me. It's always a pleasure to have you on. If you don't know FD, I don't know how. The tags will be popped up here. The Democrat Party relied on courting the South this election, the way historically the Republican and Democrat Party have during the years. The Civil Rights Campaign are political vectors only when they support the majority of America. But the fact of the matter is, because of the constant pandering to the right, the normalcy of America is shifting further and further. I don't want to blame the demographics I'm seeing directly, but to say history doesn't have a causation, I'd be deterring into eluding myself of political actors complicit in the ongoing historical parabel of black, queer, and communal oppression. This is our lives, guys. This is our Baka lives. This is our community. Like, this is our Baka community. Why don't we care for our neighbors? Why do we continue to fall into the historical cesspools of degradation, which lead to men being elected like Donald Trump? An SA. Whole time he hops on stage saying these immigrants are SAers, these immigrants are SAers. Whole time he an SAer with a toupee, and he cheats on his wife. I don't mean to do low blows now. Let's stop doing that. But it seems to me y'all just want criminals to look a certain way. But the criminals are on podcasts saying that immigrants are the problem. Then they hop on their jet and go to Mar-a-Lago, have a party. Whole time they're meeting up with the billionaires, and you can't even pay for your bread. You've been duped. The Southern strategy relies on you not knowing your black, queer, and immigrant neighbor enough in order to be duped by these politicians who can't even make their robots run in our climate. The Cybertruck sees a Canadian winter and faults. On the real though, I'm gonna have to say this again. Look out for who's beside you. An extent of oppression, yes. But you have to realize how they'll use the people you don't have in your circles for vectors of political gain. The anti-trans rhetoric campaign has made people like Matt Walsh and Ben Shapiro millions of dollars. Billionaires this election benefiting from Trump's campaign cuts, even more untold billions. And you with nothing but fear out of washrooms? This is so much bigger than that. The root of our evils are ancient and around us, but it's up for you to figure out how to move through them. Put yourself in the shoes of someone in Goldwater's time, in Nixon's time. What would you do? I wish you luck. All I can give you is the tools, fam. I'll see y'all next time. This has been Turb. Stop listening to them SAers. Meow.